the floor is now goes to Susanna Stromerova. Thank you very much to Karolina Doshova for the technical specifications, for the technical information, and thank you for all her technical support throughout the conference. Welcome to our conference. There are not many of us today, and this leads me to what I need to say at the outset, because there have been quite a few panelists, especially those from abroad who cannot be with us today. It is because in Germany, the employers are giving notice to employees who have not been vaccinated. It is like this trend goes like an avalanche in Germany. So those who are not vaccinated and do not want to get vaccinated have to leave, which results in a situation where there is few staff, not enough staff in the birthing centers and maternity hospitals. So these who stay are overloaded with work and go on strike because they cannot manage the workload they have. And for these reasons, they cannot be here with us today. It's not a local matter only, because we have had speakers. We had speakers from many parts of Germany, Aachen, Berlin, and other places, and none of them can get can join us. The Latvian speaker is unfortunately COVID positive. Dr. Pankova, the chief doctor from Uherské Hradiště, called me saying that she's on duty and is too busy to join us. Then the chief midwives from Příbram and Olomouc are also too busy at work. As a replacement, I also called my colleagues or midwives from Brno, and the situation is similar. They are either on holiday or overloaded with work. Therefore, I welcome Hanna Appeltová, who is the chief midwife from Jablonec nad Nisou. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Could you just say something so that we can hear your voice? Good evening. Thank you. We hear you very well. And then there are another two colleagues who are Czech but work in Britain, Lenka Pazdera and Barbara Hanachová, who have been living and working in Great Britain for quite a long time, so they can represent also the foreign part in our conference. So this would be all for the start. So what I must also remember is to thank to the Deutsch-Tschechische Zukunftsfonds for supporting us financially, especially in terms of interpreting and technical support and the presentations. There is now a very interesting commentary on what you said. Lenka Pazdera writes that starting April 2022, the vaccination will be mandatory in Britain for all midwives and for medical staff. Yeah, it seems that many people are aware of some lack of logics, have different opinions, differing opinions. But back to our debates, back to our topic today. Today's topic is the family suites in hospitals and examples of good practices, good practice. I have addressed some 9 maternity hospitals. Last time we talked about the Rakovník and Brno, the large and maternity hospital, and Zlín also. Today we were supposed to talk about Příbram, Uherské Hradiště, Olomouc, plus the foreign representative. That means the Stadt. And we should talk about the role of the family suites in support of healthy and natural childbirth. Now the presentation, my presentation on family suites in shortened version, so that we can specify what family suites are actually. Because a very frequent question that comes up is why and what they are like. So the first would be about the first point would be the attitude of the state and the possibility of informed choices. Currently, the situation in the Czech Republic is that the state does not support or even ignores provision of care outside hospital, and it is not covered by the health insurance, and midwives may get prosecuted or even punished in an exemplary way. I've got a colleague from Pilsen who also went through prosecution, and she had to pay 100,000 crowns as penalty, and even though everything went fine and nothing wrong was proved. But another thing is that some women simply do not want to give birth at maternity hospital, and if they cannot find a midwife, they rather do homework without attendance, which of course increases the risks for both the mother and the baby. Now the second point is the birth centers or midwifery care. The society which I represent was running a birthing center some 20 years ago, but because of the state's approach, it had to change to a teaching or awareness raising center. And one of the ways the state prevents the midwifery centers, the freestanding ones, is the law or the governmental decree which says that the gynecologist must be present within 5 minutes wherever births take place. But if in a birthing center a gynecologist should be 24/7, he again is required to have certain equipment, and he or she needs an operating room with including an anesthesiologist. And if you organize the individual, the workload, you need to pay 5. You end up having to pay for 5 gynecologists, 5 anesthesiologists, a doctor with another specialization, and like neonatologist, of course, plus the midwives. So what happens is that even what happens is that not only the midwifery units, freestanding ones, cannot operate, in fact, but also the smaller maternity hospitals have to close down, because what is argued is that the doctors don't have enough practice in dealing with pathologies, and on the other hand, in big hospitals, there are plans for midwifery centers, and at the moment there are three of them. There are three of them in the maternity hospitals, but at the same time, although the care is midwifery-led, the doctor must be on admission at the same time as at the moment of birth, during the second stage of labor, and there is no continuity of care. So what happens that when a woman comes and a birthing woman comes, she does not know the staff, the care provider. Last week we had Ms. Kameníková from Brno, who would be interested in working and cooperating with the community midwives, but she does not realize a lot of interest. They only have one midwife interested. And this brings me into another issue, which is the lack of standards, lack of midwifery standards, because the current practices and the current standards are those set by the Obgyn Society, not made by midwives themselves. Actually, the question is whether what is called midwifery-led units are in fact midwifery-led units. They are called midwifery centers, but the question is whether they can be referred to as midwifery-led units. Now, why women want to give birth at home? The first factor is that it might be simply because of their lifestyle. The next issue is very negative experience from the previous birth, so that they don't want to repeat it. Yet another factor is an elder child, which may be very small, and they don't want to get separate from that elder baby or elder child. And yet another factor is the experience, the positive experience from the previous birth, which may lead them to a conviction that they don't want to burden the system with giving birth at hospital again. Now the real risks, or not the real risks that are associated with home birth. It may happen. What may happen to a midwife attending home birth is that the situation might appear where the midwife is in stress because she doesn't know what the progress will be, and still has to count has to include another 30 minutes for transfer into hospital. So if the birthing center was available, this stress would not be there. Of course, another factor is the lack of knowledge, actually, which may be more prevalent among midwives in hospitals, who may not be well versed in the process of natural birth, actually, and may not be aware of the fact that a certain symptom may signal a problem for the baby, for instance. Another thing that may increase the risk is the stubborn attitude of parents who, at any price, under any circumstances, just want to give birth at home. What may also be present is the negative attitude in case of transfer, and what may also happen is ignoring the community midwife's attitude by parents. To sum up the facts, the fear of home births is based on the fact that we lack experience with that. So it's xenophobia, the fear of something I'm not familiar with. You don't learn much at schools for midwives about home births. Our organization provides regularly, on a regular basis, provides courses, especially those run by Barbara Kosveld, and a few teachers from the midwifery schools attend our courses. But in Ostrava, for instance, despite the provision of master's degree, there is no room for teaching anything about home births. Another factor is the increasing medicalization of birth. You only learn what is happening at hospital. And another factor, the last factor I can mention, is that you cannot practically learn the skills for home birth in hospital under the current system. Now back to the family suites. The ideal situation would be if the care was really midwifery-led and the community midwife could cooperate with the facility-based midwife, that for all the paperwork and technicalities are part of the suite, so that the midwife does not need to leave the room for these reasons. There's an ensuite bathroom and non-clinical looking. And how a family suite might work is that a midwife who has been the care provider throughout the pregnancy makes a kind of contract with a maternity hospital. Then the wife, the pregnant woman, would register with the maternity hospital so that the admission is made easier and faster later on. That's the community midwife provides care for the pregnant wife, and she, if everything is all right, the midwife brings the birthing woman only in the latent phase stage latent phase of the second stage. It means when the woman is 7 to 8 centimeters, open 7 to 8 centimeters. So before this accompanying midwife would then call the maternity hospital, announcing that she's bringing the birthing woman. The hospital will then sign in the new client, so that all the expenses are covered by the insurance. The community midwife provides the care during the birth and afterwards, and until the transfer to the postnatal ward and or discharge. And in case of complications, the community midwife transfers in case it's necessary, transfers the midwife to the community, to the hospital midwife, or to a doctor. And so that the woman is then transferred into another room. But if the woman wishes so, the community midwife or the accompaniment can stay with her even under the medical care. The advantages of such family suites are the environments that really boost or support or empower the woman to give birth naturally. At the same time, it also provides for practical training inside training of midwives, but also future doctors to gain more experience with the physiology of birth. So, at the same time, of course, the time, you don't have to count on extra, you don't have to include extra time for the transfer when in the family suite, already when in hospital. What happened to me, I was already in the second stage. I had a woman who was already in the second stage, and we had to get all over the city, and it was very difficult because of the traffic conditions. All went on well in the end, but if we had been in the hospital, there might not have been so much stress. There would not have been so much stress around it. What prevents the inclusion of family suites in hospitals, I think, is the lack of goodwill on the part of hospitals. Because what I have come across is a reaction like, yeah, we would like to, but there was always a but, like we don't have enough room or another reason. This is one thing, but another thing is also very clearly put and understandable standards of care provided by community midwives. As far as I know, in 2004, systems. And a third factor is listening to each other. This is what we also like. I mean, the community and hospital sphere area. What is also against is what is threatening. What is the threat for in introducing the family suites is the fear of what I don't know. both on the part of doctors and midwives. This has to do with the lack of willingness to learn new things, to change the routines, the style of work I'm used to. And this also has to do with ego problems. And another handicap, yet another handicap, is the reluctance of insurance companies to make contracts with midwives. Because unless the care is prescribed by a doctor, it won't be, even the midwife-led care is not prescribed by a doctor, it won't be covered by the general insurance, it won't be covered by insurance at all. But to sum up on a positive note, in a positive tone, where there is goodwill, the way will be found. So this would be everything. Now, are there any questions or comments? Is there any urgent questions? Because there will be room afterwards to, or shall we leave it for later on? Okay then. So. Oh yeah, that's been big hand. Thank you. So the next presentation. Well, yes, those of you who you have seen our videos. You have seen a presentation from Berlin, and I have made a shortened version of this presentation. This is how I view it. Technical note. To be able to see the presentation well, you can move the icons, the speakers. So going to the presentation about Berlin. So recently there has been a shortage of midwives, a significant shortage of midwives, and there have been various events and strikes going on to raise the prestige of the midwife profession. This presentation says that although the number of births has increased by 14% over the last 10 years, the number of births has gone down by 19%. The number of midwives has risen by 247%, but to be able to also have some private life, most of the midwives work part-time. And for a few years now, since the liability insurance has risen dramatically by almost 250% to some 9,000 euros for the freelancers, many of them combine the freelance work with a part-time work at hospital, because it is also better in terms of their remuneration. They are more satisfied with this system, with this way of work. We had a colleague from Bensberg last week, and they are very satisfied with this model. and the individual care is only possible if the midwife has a midwifery student with her. Then she can get one-to-one care. But now back to the education. Previously, specialized education took 7 semesters and led to a BA degree. It used to take 3 years. Now they have 7 semesters to win the BA degree, and there can be another 4 semesters leading to a master's degree. There's also a dual program now, quite new, that combines practical and theoretical training and education, and they are they seem quite satisfied with this model. Most of the midwives do not do home births, but in most cases it's just the antenatal and postnatal care, because it is not it is not good for them for financial reasons. So as I mentioned earlier, the one-to-one care is usually not possible because of the workload. And in case of a cesarean section, the mother stays with the baby from the very moment of birth. The bonding is supported already as early as in the operating room. The partner is present and the breastfeeding is also supported. This clinic, Vivantes Friedrichshain in Berlin, is part of a chain of clinics. Now, is there any question or comment concerning what I've just presented? If not, then yet another presentation. This is about the births from Filder Clinic. It says anthroposophy clinic. The anthroposophic medicine takes a bit different approach to a patient or to a client. I saw the clinic some 15 years ago, and it was a really wonderful experience for both of us. The clinic was started in 1974, and it is one of 3 large anthroposophy facilities in Germany. In spring 2021, they opened 2 new birthing rooms. Now you see the head doctor, Hauke Schur. They have about 2,000 births a year. They have started a new neonatology ward for Anna, and they also do twin births and breech births vaginally. And they've been certified as baby friendly since 2003. The family suites, when talking about family suites, the clinic supports attendance or presence of a birthing partner, also during in the time of the COVID pandemic, and the siblings may join the mother after the baby is born. The care during birth is provided by midwives. They try to offer enough privacy And even in case of a cesarean, the father is present, the C-section rate is 14%. After an uncomplicated birth, the woman stays approximately 2 to 3 days, and 5 days in case of a cesarean. The postnatal care is provided by a community midwife, and the maternity hospital invites women to find a midwife for the postnatal care. Yeah, but also the antenatal care, of course, as early as possible, as early during the pregnancy as possible. And the postnatal and antenatal midwives also make kind of association so that they can cooperate. Now, are there any questions concerning this last presentation before we continue before we start the panel discussion? Actually, I have a couple of questions. Get ready for especially for the panelists. The first question is, are you satisfied with the with your with the scope of care that your facility provides? Is there anything you would like to change or improve? I will ask all the panelists one after another, and then maybe also the other participants, so that anybody can join in and comment on it. I would say that there's always something to change and improve, but I can't think of anything particular at the moment. I was already thinking about it when reading the material for this conference. Maybe I would welcome more individualized care, because we are unable to provide the complete continuity of care. So does that mean that one midwife is in charge of more women at the moment? Yes, we have 3 birthing rooms. So what can happen is that the midwives must run from one to another, or to the third one. But that might be really difficult for the midwife. Yes, it is. This leads to a situation where it's midwifery is just a job for the midwife. So this actually might be a thing to change. Yeah, if we had more midwives. But it's also a question or an issue for the hospital to change. This is what I would really like, if the hospital was willing and able to take up more midwives, so that the one-to-one care is possible. I remember that many years ago we went to Switzerland to see a maternity hospital in Frauenfeld and in Basel, and they told us there they made research among midwives, or rather they asked the midwives to record how much time in minutes they spent taking care of the material, in cleaning and things like that, and on the other hand, to record how much time they spent how much time they spend providing care for the birthing woman. And this research, also at the start, the midwives protested because they felt having extra workload making these records. But the results of the research really showed that the hospital is understaffed, and this helped. Actually, we have had extra workers. We have managed to get extra workers for this technical work, but the issue is that I cannot be in two places at the same time. So when I need to breathe with one woman and the other woman needs it as well, I cannot be in two places at the same time. That is the problem. And now I see also a comment from Ms. Holubatova here, offering that the hospitals might start a cooperation with the community midwives, because if the community midwives could be present with the birthing woman in the hospital, then the community midwife could provide care for the woman she has come up with. Yes, it is. Yeah, this is what we've been also thinking about, but currently we only have one such community midwife. Yeah, but another thing is the security of work, and we would need to have a good contract with the community midwives, and also because what we experience is that a community midwife comes and she doesn't say her name, and it kind of works undercover. In fact, what I would welcome, is that is if a community midwife came, or even a doula came to our maternity hospital and said, this is my name, and I would like to come here and bring my women. Would it be possible? This is what I would enjoy. This brings me to a thank you for saying this, and this reminds me that we have another event that we're organizing will be about this. I think that this is a problem that many of us share. Linga, could you also say something concerning the situation in Britain at the moment? Or recently, I have been accompanying women to maternity hospitals and my experience that is then on theoretical terms, the maternity hospitals provide quite a large scope of models, so ranging from home birth to highly medicalized birth. It seems like anybody can be satisfied, but in practice, there's a shortage of staff. So what happens quite often, is that this model of care is unavailable when a woman is interested in it. And the trend, unfortunately, is that there's an increasing trend in higher and higher medicalization of birth. And it seems to me even sometimes that from the very start, even in straightforward pregnancies, reasons are really sought for to kind of make the woman higher risk. And so what would happen? So what happens that what happens is that even women with low risk pregnancies is that they end up with highly medicalized births, although they could have had natural births. So for what I would welcome for the future is working with this. I mean, supporting during the antenatal period, empowering women to give birth naturally. The maternity hospitals I've been working in, both in London, and each of them is slightly different in terms of the care they provide. Now, Barbara Hanachala, could you tell us something on this? I've been a coordinator in a birthing center, and from my point of view, I would also improve the number of staff. I think it's a very general problem. In our birthing center, the problem is that if another facility is lacking the staff, my midwives are transferred or delegated to have a delivery room at hospital or a postnatal ward, which means that I cannot admit women to the birthing center where I work, which I coordinate, because this would not be safe enough. And if I only have 2 midwives and we have some women postnatal period, and we don't have enough staff to take care of the neonate or to do the paperwork. This complicates our work a lot. At the moment, there are these staff problems on the one hand, and on the other hand, we are dealing with the standards and or guidelines. In terms of the criteria for the women to for the criteria which discriminate between women to have the midwifery-led care in the birthing center, and those who have to give birth in the midwifery hospital, and then there might be some conflicts or arguments about who will take care of and be in charge of this or that woman. And the reason is the unclarity in this respect. Are there any questions or comments on this? So the next question then, are there any standards or guidelines that you use, that you follow? Especially those that support a normal birth? Barbara, you have said that you have some standards, or is it so? Yes, we have. In Great Britain, we have nice guidelines. These are national standards that are mandatory for all hospitals, and also freestanding midwives. And these national standards are given, and at the same time the hospitals are free to adapt to a certain degree, so to adapt these standards to a certain degree to their particular situations. In various parts of Great Britain, the hospitals may may have to deal with different issues, maybe in terms of the social social conditions, or the issues that the deals, or the so, or I mean the different demographic criteria or demographic conditions of the birthing women's, but still but in general the question, the diversity is not that big. So one can say that a midwife can work in any hospital throughout Great Britain. The differences are slight. So in terms of different use of prostaglandin, or a midwife may come across different differing differing growth standards, or there may be difference in the moment for medicalization. In my birthing center, we had kind of traffic or beacon system, or traffic light system: green light, yellow light, and red light, amber light and red light. But at the same time, it also depends on who is on duty on that particular day. So I, for myself, may decide that I will admit this one particular woman, whereas my colleague would not admit her into care. And we have recently also faced a lot of changing recommendations, changing recommendations under the COVID situation. So these are all reasons for kind of gray zones. So from time to time, it gets quite difficult. Linka, what is your experience with the NICE guidelines? Yeah, I agree with Barbara. They are applicable for all maternity hospitals, and the local hospitals may adapt the rules for the individual conditions. I can see this in the in the individual birthing centers. The criteria might differ for a facility from facility, but there are always some amber women, yeah, which will be admitted by somebody and not by somebody else. I would also think that this amber light has the number of them has increased, and so it's also to a certain degree about their own wish and about her own experience. I mean, about the experience, of the experience of the midwife, in terms of how much a particular midwife feels free to take care of a woman who is in the amber zone. Actually, I didn't mean just the standards in terms of the criteria for birthing center or maternity hospital. I also meant the individual or the individual standards on the individual guidelines in terms of approach to a laboring and birthing woman. Because I thought that these guidelines might also help in terms of inspiration, being a source of inspiration for the Czech midwifery-led centers. So Hannah, could you tell us something about this, whether they might be applicable. Actually, we're in the Czech Republic, so we must respect the Obgyn standards. These are not standards in this strict sense. These are just practices. Simply when they what I want to add is that the guidelines are exact standards in terms of how to take care, how to provide care for a straightforward pregnancy, how to take care of a woman with diabetes. But that's nice about them, I would say, about the standards, because somebody who is new may know what to do. Yeah, you're right. That's a basic document for all the midwives and all the local practices, individual home centers, birth centers, and midwifery and maternity hospitals are derived from the NICE guidelines. I have also sent Carolina. I have also sent this in another document. These NICE guidelines. But Lenka, could you say us something about this? You've raised your hand. Yeah. Yeah, there are particular guidelines concerning the admission, particular guidelines concerning the care during labor. Yeah, definitely helps. It's helpful. But at the same time, there are really a lot of them, a lot of particular. So, which means that if you are busy in a birthing center and there's a big workload, you very rarely have a choice to sit down and list a particular and find a particular standard within so many in the NICE guidelines. At the same time, on the local level, there are some new recommendations and new adaptations, and the midwife follows the older version or the general NICE guidelines, and she is quite confused because her senior midwife tells her to do things differently from how she's used to doing them. Why I have made a short outline or a short version is that I want to show to all our participants is that it really tells also a lot about the communication. For example, it says that explain to the nulliparous and parous women who are low risk that low risk that birth is a low risk thing, that it's a natural thing. Or another thing, explain to nulliparous women with low risk for complications that planning a birth in a midwifery-led unit is especially suitable for them because of the low rate of interventions and better outcomes for better outcomes for the woman and the same outcomes for the baby. I really doubt that such guidelines are available in the Czech Republic. And or in the section about monitoring, it says do not offer CTG to low risk women. Whereas in the Czech Republic, this is something that a woman comes across immediately. That at the very start, the CTG is down to her. Whereas in Britain, it says, I mean, no CTG is done automatically to a low risk woman. As for the second stage of labor, the differences here, even in the very definition of stage of labor. So because the active stage is only defined when you can see the baby. And for an nulliparous woman, the normal time is 3 hours from the start of the active phase of the second stage. We will go through all of it in detail, but I think we will send a link to the NICE guidelines to all the participants via email, so they can go through it. Now the floor goes to Lenka Pazdera. As for the CTGs, for the monitoring, there are studies which concludes that CTG does not have any impact on the outcomes, does not improve the outcomes, but on the other hand, only leads to increased medicalization of birth. And this is the reason why it is not used that's not recommended for the CTG. But on the other hand, for the women with higher risk pregnancy, there is continuous monitoring. My experience is that, and therefore I would say that in terms of CTG, it's better in the Czech Republic, because my experience, as I said, is that when there is some risk, the monitoring is not continuous. What is the situation, Hannah? What is the situation in your hospital? Yeah, we do CTG at the start, but it's not continuous. So the next question. How is it that there is a question by chat? Question: how is it with the standards? Yeah, when faced with when they conflict with the wishes of the woman. It's a question to the panelists. How is it with the woman's wish not to comply with the recommended standards? Is the wish respected? Yeah, we try to respect the wishes. In the midwifery, in the obstetric care, or in medical care in general, the the woman has the right to refuse any procedure, even if it endangers the woman. But in case the situation is such that the baby is in danger, then we can do certain things against the wish of the woman. But this is a really very rare thing. But basically, the guidelines are recommendations. So we offer and we say to the woman, we would offer something. I would say, I would formulate it in this way. My suggestion would be, whereas doctors would usually say something more directive, and it's up to the woman to choose. But on the other hand, many women know that they know that they have an informed choice, or they have a choice. They are not informed enough. So what happens very often that the information the woman gets is one-sided, and it's up to an individual woman whether she is able and willing to get some other information, or whether she just follows the doctor's advice. I'm now working in a birth center, and also uh, and also when doing home births before, it was one of the major things for me. I mean, working out individual plans with women who are not straightforward, but for example with women who want to give birth vaginally after a cesarean. So with such women, for example, we go through the NICE guidelines. We say we inform the woman of the risks of the possible risk, and we also inform her about what we can do in this or that situation. And we in these terms, in this sense, we work out the individualized birth plans for the women. And it seems that currently there are more and more such plans being done, such individualized plans. Yeah, as Susanna said, there are also many women in Great Britain who have a previous traumatic experience, birth experience, and they want to, they would like to change this, although they are afraid. So to sum up, the woman has a choice. Yeah, definitely. In principle, it is up to the woman's wish should be respected. But of course, it also depends on the medical staff, and there are people who force the women to accept things that they offer. But in terms of litigation, or in front of the court, or legally, it's the woman, because she's the one who carries the baby, and it's up to her to decide what she wants for herself and for the baby. I would think that enforcing certain practices, it only worsens the situation, because if this happens, then it discourages the woman from communicating with the medical staff. So I think what should be done is to try to communicate better. And to find ways find ways to make the situation we have got in as a medical staff or as the care provider to make it acceptable for the woman and also for medical staff. I would like to ask Hanna Apolsova, what happens if the woman's wish is in conflict with the recommendations of the doctors? We have a choice of the refusal of care, but it must be written. For example, in such cases as refusal to have induction in the 41st week, which is the official recommendation. When talking about the seat monitoring, if the woman refuses, then we try to agree with her that we are arguing that we need some admission, some monitoring on the admission, so that we know how the baby is doing well. But what I have also come across is that the woman really didn't want to have monitoring. We complied with all her wishes, and then we faced litigation by her because when the outcome was not ideal. Well, yeah, this is not legally very well covered, and unfortunately, what happens is that women prefer Mr. Google to an experienced obstetrician and trust what they've learned via the internet more than the medical staff. Bara, you want to say something? I would like to follow up on what Ms. Appeltova said. Yeah, what I think is necessary here, because you complained about not enough protection. Yes, I think that this is exactly where the guidelines are necessary. Because in my case, I can, it's necessary that I document, make a good documentation of anything. So what I can do in my case is that I put down that when I inform the woman on what I should do in this case and she refuses, I'm covered, I'm protected. So this is really necessary. Last week I mentioned that that obstetrics and obstetric care is one of the most litigated areas of medicine. So if I have the guidelines to rely upon, then if I put down in the documentation, in the paperwork, that that the woman has refused, we are covered, we are protected, and nobody can say you haven't done what you should have done. Even in the case a woman refuses C-section where the baby, there is no response from the heart action. The heart action of the baby is almost none, and because the woman is in charge of accepting or not accepting the intervention. It's her responsibility. In today's world, it's the question of money. Also, although it may sound harsh, we may also need to be protected. We must also need to get protected. the Czech Republic, we have a law on medical services, which says that the medical staff can only make an intervention, do an intervention, make an intervention that a woman agrees on. At the same time, it says that the medical staff may make an intervention that might put the baby and the woman at risk, and this is a source of possible misuse. Another thing is that what happens is that it is my experience also that the doctors like to make to place the blame their colleagues for what has happened. And that this is my experience because I also went through court proceedings, and this also happened to my colleague who faced litigation, and the midwife is an ideal target for admonition. So I also think that the standards are really necessary. Hanna Appeltavad, do you want to add something to it? Actually, yeah, I agree with you. We like the guidelines because we document. Yeah, this happens in our hospital as well. Despite good paperwork and despite good records, we also experience situations where we are made responsible for adverse income. What I consider important is to stay on the objective, in the objective tone, and but when in stress you may what may happen that we are in stress, we might be really forceful in what we want her to do or what we want us to do. But we also need to have in mind that the care receiver may not see the situation in the same way, and what is automatic to us, what automatically needs to be to us, needs to be done in our mind, may not be a matter of course for the woman. So we should also keep the emotions away and to talk in a constructive way to the woman. What I also plays a role is the fear of the legal yeah of the legal impact that the adverse outcome may have, and this I think also leads to the misuse of knowledge, and what can happen is that the medical staff the medical staff may tend to force women into what they consider safe for themselves in terms of possible litigation, so that they prevent litigation. But as Hanna Appeltova says, it is also about the relationship between the doctor and the midwife, because Hanna Appeltova said that doctors may try to put the blame on the midwife. So, and that's really makes the good documentation necessary. Oh, now I have looked at the time, and it's 8:30. So I'm not now sure whether we should go through all the questions because of the time. I think we might skip question number 3 and even maybe number 4. And I would rather ask whether you can think of, and this question might especially go to our Czech British colleagues. What do you think might be done to teach health professionals not to be afraid of the home from home practices? Because what I see in the NICE guidelines is that when the woman is Paris and her pregnancy is straightforward, that she can give birth at home, it's not considered risky, and there's a big contrast in the Czech Republic. So what do you think might teach or help the health professionals not to be afraid of home-like practices? I think it's a lot about practice. It's about experience, because we have a lot of medics who want to see normal birth when they come as part of their study stay, because they have not experienced with normal birth at maternity hospitals, and they can't think of anything else but medicalized birth. So I think that with doctors, it's only the experience with the normal birth. So they see that a birth can be something different from their experience. I came across a doctor, she doctor, a female doctor, who could not think of leading the third stage without any medication. She was convinced that the woman would simply bleed out without all the medication. And another thing is that the midwife's own or the medical staff's own birth experience forms, shapes their own practice, tends to shape their own practice. If a midwife has had 3 cesareans herself, then it's difficult, becomes difficult very much for herself to accept the situation of a normal birth or of birth at home. Very probably a midwife who has had massive hemorrhage, postnatal hemorrhage, will maybe reluctant to provide care at home birth. So this also has to do with self-growth and self-development, to be able to find way and widen one's horizons. Yeah, and this is exactly why we have this project of the family suites in hospitals, so that we see this home from home, or so that we try, and doing this we try to bring the home experience into the environments where the midwives and those doctors feel safe, so that they get more experience with a normal birth. But what would be needed is involving the community midwives who have the experience with the home environment. And Ms. Lenka, would you like to add something? Talking about how to not be afraid of home birth practices, I think it's necessary for the midwifery students to see home births as early as during their studies and a normal birth in a midwifery center. And we see midwifery students who during their first birth only saw medicalized births and C-sections in hospitals. And it is not until the second year of studies, this is what I've experienced, that they see a normal birth. And that they see that birth is not, may not be a matter or a situation where the life is at risk. So I think it's very important for a student to have the experience, of normal birth. It also happens here in the Czech Republic for the midwife who have been working the whole life in delivery room hospital, it's unacceptable for them to go to attend home birth, and they trying to find excuses if they are used to working in delivery room, and they need to go or have to go to home birth as a replacement, for instance. So it's necessary to also have somebody to take as a supervisor, to somebody with whom you can consult if you are supposed to do something that you are not really familiar with. Ms. Appletona. I agree with Lenka Pazdera. I've been working as a midwife for 33 years as a hospital midwife, and I myself would be afraid of attending home birth. Although I prefer natural birth, and I think that there should be as little medicalization as possible. But going back to the question, I would like to say that there is very, very little done in terms of theoretical education of both midwives and medics, because they automatically see a pregnant woman as an ill woman, as a sick woman. And also midwives during their studies learn within those 3 years as a lot about situations which they will never come across in their practice. Whereas the practical skills are not trained enough in schools. This is what I experienced, that the new midwives that come, the fresh graduates, are very well theoretically prepared and know the impacts or effects of medication, but they are not very good with their hands, and they don't know how to touch the pregnant or birthing woman. Yeah, this also happens. This is also the case of my experience. Last year, a student from the Pardubice midwifery school wanted to have some practice in where I work with the facility, and the standards from the school, the criteria banned for the students, because the criteria said what during the study stay she has to go through and she's allowed to do and what she's not allowed to do, and explicitly there was a ban on attending home birth. So I was really shocked when hearing this. But it seems to me that we have, during the discussion, we have been able to identify the reasons that prevent or that cause the fear among the medical staff and hospital-based midwives. There are still some questions that have not been answered. I think that most of them have already been answered, at least partially, but some of them may still be left for next time. So unless you have some more questions and comments, now I would like to thank you for your participation today and invite you for our discussion next week. The link remains the same. And next week we'll be predominantly talking about midwives, different types of midwives, and also about the parents' role in terms of their requirements from the midwives on the one hand, but also about their maybe sometimes forgetting of taking care of their own health and of what they might do for health, pregnancy, and also in terms of accepting the pregnancy. Yeah. So thank you for your participation. Thank you, Carolina, for the technical support, and I wish good health to everybody. Goodbye and thank you. Good night. Have a nice weekend and see you next week. Have a nice evening.